I'm not going to do it in a traditional sense of going through each session and identifying, what did we talk about, and hopefully what were some of the key messages, because I think it wouldn't do justice to how substantive the presentations were yesterday. But I did want to acknowledge what I would say were a few key messages from my side. And of course, welcome the panelists who spoke yesterday, if there's anything that they want to add. But first, I think Dean Sonobe said it well when he gave his opening remarks, that really we are in a region where disaster risk is very high. There is a number of perils that people in the region are exposed to and unfortunately very familiar with. These aren't intellectual exercises. These are exercises of fact of day-to-day life in a number of jurisdictions within the region. And when we think about flooding, when we think about earthquakes, we think about typhoons, these are things that unfortunately are all too real and all too frequent within the region. And climate change, unfortunately, is likely to have the effect of making at least the weather-driven events more severe and more frequent. Also, I think it was important to recognize that Dean Sonobe had highlighted the important role that institutions like ADBI can play in facilitating dialogue amongst key stakeholders within the region, supporting efforts across stakeholders to really identify concrete steps that can be taken to improve resilience within the region. And I think also the important role that ADBI and hopefully over time in partnership with GIP, the important role that we can play in supporting technical workshops like this and supporting action planning and hopefully implementation and execution over the longer term time horizon. Now, my colleague Min, she gave a good overview of who we are as the Global Asia Insurance Partnership, and really what were some of the efforts that we were looking at with ADBI that we think could hopefully contribute to strengthening resilience within the region and supporting action plans related to this. And I think also was able to highlight that, essentially we're not just talking about a series of one-off initiatives or one-off events. It's part of a longer term process and a longer term value chain, so to speak, of having to understand, identify, build, and execute. And I think this theme came up repeatedly yesterday, is that, we really have to think about this, not only in the technical work, which we were very lucky. We got very comprehensive overviews from David and from Thomas and Jane about some of the different facilities that exist out there and some of the different platforms that have been developed. I think Benedict highlighted it very well when he said, the technical work is actually the easy part. It's really about how we get to implementation, which is the hard part. And as I mentioned yesterday, having spent better part of a decade working on implementation at the International Association of Insurance Supervisors, helping jurisdictions to better understand and hopefully implement the supervisory material that we had developed in the IIS, I recognize that challenge all too well. That really it is a big effort to not only develop a plan, but to actually be able to see that plan come to fruition. And so implementation, getting from idea to sort of finalization through implementation, that can be a long and arduous process. But it's important that once we have a plan, that we stick to it and having champions within the governments across the region. And I look around to many of you within the room who I know will probably be playing this role within your respective organizations, but also hopefully across your respective governments in terms of how we can actually get from idea to implementation. Now, the imperative is really on us to do this. As our colleague Lubo mentioned yesterday, he provided, I think, a quite comprehensive, though very stark picture of the risk landscape within the region. And I think it's clear that when we think about the risk landscape, we recognize that, unfortunately, the world is getting more complex and more risky. And unfortunately, that means that we, as the people within this room who hopefully are deeply committed towards building greater resilience, we have our jobs cut out for us. And I think that you hear the perspective of industry on this, where there is, of course, an increasing willingness on the part of large reinsurers, global insurers, to support efforts. But there is a limit to capacity, and there is a limit to the risks that they can effectively support risk transfer of. And this is where prevention and mitigation come in. When we think about some of the risks that we face within our respective countries. But as was mentioned on a number of occasions yesterday, this is also where adaptation comes in. And so we can't just think about risk transfer and think that we have the answer. This really does require comprehensive approaches, whole of government, whole of region approaches, to actually think about, what can we do to strengthen prevention? What can we do to strengthen mitigation? How can we invest in mitigation? But ultimately, also, unfortunately, given the trajectory that we're on, how can we also adapt to a changing world, a changing climate? And so risk transfer has a role, but I think all of us recognize that there are limits to that role. And really, we're talking about the residual that's left over after we've taken those comprehensive steps in terms of prevention, mitigation, and adaptation. The last point that I really wanted to draw attention to is that when we think about the different ways that we can develop risk transfer solutions, we really are, again, coming back to that residual risk that's left over after we've taken the other necessary steps to hopefully limit how much we have to rely on insurance. Because as I said, it's clear based on the conversations yesterday, but I think all of us are well aware that there are limits. So there are additional steps that we need to be taking. And so, hearing from my colleague Craig yesterday, I think that there's a recognition that we really do need to think about this in a way that is ultimately going to ensure that at a time of crisis or disaster, we're not scrambling to find where the solution lies. We really need to be able to identify and develop and hopefully crisis test some of our plans before the actual event happens. And unfortunately, I think in this world that we're living in now, where there is, I think, the remnants of a fiscal crisis that all of us have gone through in the last few years. I think balance sheets of governments, public institutions remain under significant pressure. The economy has not returned to quote unquote normal. we have to recognize that some of the solutions that we may have relied on, some of the donor community that we may have relied on, may not have the capacity to be able to provide the support that they would have been able to only a few years ago. And so this is why it's even more important that we be proactively thinking about how we can take concrete steps, looking at, again, at prevention, adaptation, prevention, mitigation, and adaptation, and then thinking about some of those risk management or risk transfer solutions. And so in this environment, I think, this is, I hope, a bit of a call to action within this group today, as we think through how we can hopefully develop and really think through what are the steps that we need to be taking within our countries, within our institutions, but also more broadly across the region. And so I really look forward to today's conversation. I really look forward to hearing, I hope, from everyone within this room. Hopefully no, as we like to say in English, no shrinking violets. I know I may have put some people in an uncomfortable position yesterday in terms of calling on them to answer, but I really do want to hopefully impart that this is an emphasis of today's discussion, is that it is really looking to draw in the perspectives and viewpoints of the people sitting within this room. It really does need to be an interactive discussion. So I'll stop there. I'm going to see if David, Benedict, if there's anything you want to add. Perfect. And I'm going to call out to the heavens and see if Pichaya wants to add anything.
No, I'm okay. You summarized really good, Connor.
Okay, well, perfect. Well, thank you so much. And we've got a couple of sessions. We'll kick off with a roundtable around member priorities and disaster risk financing and insurance. I have my friend here, Renz, who's going to, with Pichaya, hopefully facilitate this conversation. Then we'll have a short coffee break before coming back for the brainstorming and on implementation and action plans. I just wanted to highlight that, again, we have a pretty packed day, even though we're only convening for the morning. So we're going to have a short break, which will hopefully allow us to maximize the value of having us all together today. But with that, thank you. I'll turn it over to Renz.
Yeah, thank you so much. And again, good morning, everyone. I hope you had a sufficient time to absorb all of the lessons that we heard yesterday to prepare you for this morning session. Before I give the floor to our colleagues to present their thoughts, to share their insights on disaster risk financing, let me just share with you briefly some updates from the ASEAN Secretariat. Oh, by the way, I'm Renz Adrian Galub from the ASEAN Secretariat. So I'll be just showing you some of the updates on the program of activities for the progress of ADRFI Phase 2 capacity building roadmap. So basically, we're already in the Phase 2 of the ASEAN DRFI. So it's ASEAN Cross-Sectoral Coordinating Committee on DRFI, which was established in 2013. Which has the following objectives. So it's there to facilitate the implementation of the ASEAN Disaster Risk and Financing Roadmap. It's to enhance the collaboration among the relevant sectoral bodies and ensure the effectiveness in implementing the ADRFI roadmap, and to monitor the progress of initiatives under the work plan of the ADRFI roadmap. So this is also a sectoral multi-group engagement where ASEC is involved in primarily in capacity building. Right. So what I'm going to share with you are some of just some of the updates or what we have so far in terms of capacity building in the area of DRFI. So here's just a short visual of where we are right now. So Phase 1 is implemented in around 2016 and 2017. And so we have this following activities. Phase 2, we're currently in phase 2 and we're focused on the 3 components as you can see in the slide. So we're here to improve the data required for assessing disaster risk exposures and financing solutions. We have harnessing risk advisory expertise from academia, international organizations, and private sector to provide advice and design innovative insurance and risk financing solutions, and enhance capacity building amongst ASEAN members in ex-ante disaster risk financing, which is basically the role of the ASEAN Secretariat. And now just some updates on the related meetings on the cross-sectoral committee. So last Feb, we have the 11th ASEAN-DRFI meeting. And here we noted the progress of the program of activities in 2021 and some of the plans for 2022. So capacity building activities in 2021, we had knowledge sharing with the World Bank, CDRIF, and agri-webinar insurance. We can see that later in the slide. So we have overview of what has been done and what the future activities as far as capacity building is concerned. We also have the risk assessment and risk advisory with the completion of EED and ELD for the first 3 AMS initiative. So basically, this risk assessment and risk advisory is managed by Nanyang Technological University. Right. And ASEAN Secretariat has prepared a concept note to include the pandemic risks, given the given what has transpired in the past 3 years as far as COVID is concerned. Right. And here's an overview. So basically, the risk assessment, again, risk assessment and risk advisory falls under the purview of NTU. And now we're already here at the 4th workshop. So we have the public asset insurance, which we held starting yesterday. And for 2023 first half, the workshop 5 and 6 will be planned and held. And yeah, so here we have what we're doing now is the current capacity building for 2022. And Cambodia will be chairing the ASEAN-DRFI until the first quarter of 2023. Okay. Yeah, so basically those are the some of the updates for the capacity building of ADRFI. And maybe you can shift the presentation for, sorry. So having mentioned the updates from the ADRFI, we will now jumpstart the sharing session, and Pichaya and I will be helping out in facilitating the exchange and the discussion among the participants today. So I think Pichaya may want to start.
Thank you so much, Rent, and good morning, everyone. So welcome to the day 2 of this workshop. As Connor already mentioned, today we will focus mainly on the discussion and how to move forward about this implementation of the ADIFI roadmap. So the session for the roundtable, basically what the discussion was focused on is just to try to access what actually happening right now in ASEAN and in individual member countries. Try to discuss and access the current situation, as well as try to identify what the countries, the ASEAN member country would need to make the plan successful. So we have seen the brief presentation by Renz that this roadmap has been endorsed since 2013. So next year would mark 10 years of this roadmap. And we have 2 phases already to work on. And the latest progress is the database that has been developing and still being developed. The risk advisory expertise and the report with the consultation with the member countries, as well as the capacity building and training activities that been given by the donor and the partner in the past maybe 3-4 years already. So So what I would like just to encourage everyone is just to engage in this conversation. It's just there's a couple of the major question that we would like to get your view and the answer. So what, for example, the main one is just like what I said, we try to assess the current situation. So what have been done or ongoing in policy measure in your country. There's already that we have for the development of the disaster risk financing program. And then also there's a question is to encourage you to share with us what would be the gap or things that haven't been done in your country that necessary just to get it done for the successful of this DRF solution. And then also just to see when we are able to identify that gap and what kind of the support the country would need to get moving forward to make this implementation or to advance this implementation of the disaster risk financing solution. So let's just come with the first question first. So like I mentioned, so what are the initiative or the policy measure that has been adopted in your country for the development of the National Disaster Risk Financing Program? And can you share the progress? Because if some of you recall that the roadmap of ADRFI has two layers. The first layer is for the regional level, and the second layer is for the national level. So that's why we want to ask this question to our ASEAN member country who joining us today, and to share with us. So yeah, this is the first question. Anyone would like just to help with the first sharing?
So we have our colleagues from the Philippines.
Yeah.
Good morning. So in the interest of time, I'm going to present a condensed version of the Philippines DRFI strategy. So the Philippines has crafted a DRFI strategy aimed at sustaining economic growth through protecting gains from natural disaster shocks and reducing the impact of disasters on the poorest and most vulnerable. The strategy has been developed in the context of the National Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Plan, which aims to ensure that communities have access to effective and applicable disaster risk financing and insurance. It is consistent with the ASEAN Agreement on Disaster Management and Emergency Response, ADMER, and the ASEAN-DRFI Roadmap, and a commitment under our second Catastrophe Deferred Drawdown Option, CAT-DDO. To operationalize this in a comprehensive manner, the government organizes disaster risk financing initiatives at three levels: the national, local, and household. The national level aims to improve the financing of post-disaster emergency response, recovery, and reconstruction needs. The local level, on the other hand, aims to provide local governments with funds for post-disaster recovery and reconstruction efforts. The household level, on the other hand, empowers the poor and vulnerable households and owners of small and medium-sized enterprises to quickly restore their livelihoods after a disaster. It is worth noting that one of the identified key steps under the national level is quantifying and clarifying the contingent liabilities faced by the government. So in 2014, the catastrophe risk model was developed and continuous risk analytics works are being done to find the appropriate financing mechanism for disaster events. Recognizing that there is no single financial instruments that can address all risks, the government is implementing its DRFI as a three-tiered layer strategy depending on the frequency and severity of disasters. Risk retention and risk transfer instruments are being implemented by the government to address, of which the risk transfer instruments aims to improve the government's disaster response capacity in case of infrequent but potentially devastating disasters by providing access to immediate liquidity following such events. On the other hand, risk retention instruments can either be classified as contingent financing or budgetary instruments. The former are financial instruments that provide liquidity immediately after a shock, while the latter refers to reserve funds specifically designated for financing disaster-related expenditure. So for us, we need to provide for a comprehensive framework for the implementation of financial protection solutions against the onslaught of natural disasters at the national, local, and individual levels. We advocate for continuous risk analytics work to find appropriate financing mechanisms for disaster events, to inform policymakers of the costs and benefits and opportunity costs of different types of risk financing mechanisms, which allows policymakers to decide the appropriate combination of different risk financing instruments to protect against events of different frequency and severity. Such risk layering aims to minimize the cost of financing and optimize the timing of financing and ensure that cheaper sources of money are used first, with the most expensive instruments used only in exceptional circumstances. I end here. Thank you.
Thank you so much for those inputs. So let's keep the ball rolling. Yeah.
Okay. So good morning, everybody. My name is Thai. I'm from the Ministry of Finance, Vietnam. I would like to share with you some update of awareness our country with regard to the initiative and policy which we have been adopted with regard to a national disaster risk financing program. Firstly, I would like to say with you that we haven't got the DRFI strategy yet, even though we have the disaster management strategy, but we have not developed the DRFI strategy yet. That is on the strategy. With regard to the legal framework, the first thing is that we in our law on management and EU public asset, we have been recognized insurance as one of the finance mechanism for transfer risk. And also we, under our law on insurance business, we also have an article, some provision which also recognize insurance of public assets should be encouraged to develop. And besides public asset insurance, also agricultural insurance is one of our priority. So I can say to you that under our legal framework and also under our government policy, public asset insurance and agricultural insurance against natural disaster would be our priority for now. And then in implementation, we already developed a national program on agricultural insurance. But the result up till now is still moderate. So there are several problems, several challenges in implementing the national program on agricultural insurance. I think the more important reason for that is that the awareness of the people, and not only the people, but also the awareness of the public and even the awareness of the public servant, public officer with regard to the agricultural insurance. And the second thing is the level of subsidies in agricultural insurance. In the past, we used to subsidize, the government used to subsidize up to 100% of the premium. But at the current program, we only subsidy 90%, and 90% for the poor and the near poor, and 20% for the other. So many people, still arguing for subsidy up to 100%. But we argue that you cannot subsidize up to 100%, because that would be lead to the moral hazards problem. And that is agricultural insurance for the public asset insurance against natural disasters. We are in the process of developing the program. We still facing many issues with regard to which product and at which local should be covered by the program. So we have a lot of debates. Which kind of public assets should be covered by the insurance, and which province, which localities should be part of the program. So and many things we have to work on with regard to the infrastructure for the development of the national program, such as the database, the public asset database for example, the loss experience, and the concrete database about the value, the history of the asset, and the replacement cost with regard to the asset affected by the disaster. And also we also need to build the modeling and analyze the agricultural insurance. We also have to, to raise up the awareness of the public, of the people about the role of the insurance to protect the public asset against natural disaster. And currently we have from the ADB and from the other multinational international financial institutions such as the World Bank, the UNDP. They have developed several projects to pilot insurance for public asset in certain city level, such as ADB with the project in Hue province, in Hue city, and the World Bank supporting the Da Nang city to develop the insurance program covering the public asset of the city. And also the UNDP, they also in the process of developing a program for public asset insurance in several cities in Vietnam. So that's all from me. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can we hear from the other participants?
Hi, I'm from Thailand, so I have to share about this. Actually, in Thailand, we don't have for the public asset we not have yet, but we have to study about that. So now in Thailand we have the project with the relevant organization like FPO or Bank for Agriculture or and government organization and insurer private sector for the crop insurance assigned by the dissolution of the cabinet. Like crop insurance, we covered natural peril such as flood, drought, windstorm, fire. Yeah, but so yeah, we in Thailand we really have a study about the protect the public asset, but maybe the DPM will have some plan about to transfer the list. Yeah, maybe you can do share คุยไหมแชร์นิดนึงไหมเอาไหมแชร์นิดนึงว่าเราyeah, but the, in the DPM organization still have the study about the transfer list about public asset. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. How about our other colleagues? Hasn't shared yet. Yes, our colleagues from Indonesia.
Thank you. Good morning, all. We are from Indonesia. We developed our DRFI strategy in 2018. And one of the focus of our DRFI strategy is the establishment of a pooling fund for disaster. And currently we are strengthen the capacity of the institutional of the pooling fund for disaster, and also develop the technical regulation, operational regulation for the institution. So this fund is managed by an institution who also manage the environment and climate fund. The goal of the pooling fund for disaster is actually to protect our budget from shock of the disaster impact, and it will, for the short term, it will be complement the regular budget for the disaster, the regular disaster reserve fund. Based on our the roadmap of our DRFI strategy, the next thing that we want to do is to strengthen our agricultural insurance, aquaculture insurance, and also property house insurance. Yesterday we talked about mandatory for house insurance. Actually, we want to explore more on that. And another thing that we are currently focused on is insurance for public asset, and my friends from public asset management will update you on that.
Thank you, Mbak Devi. Just giving a short updated, especially from my college, what my colleague said, that I'm from DGSAM, Directorate General of State Assets Management in Ministry of Finance. Want to give some updated from the things that have already mentioned from Switzerland, actually, that we already implemented the state asset insurance, or we sometimes say that ABMN, or Asuransi Barang Milik Negara, since 2019. So we have some improvements from the 2019 up to 2022. We know that in the 2019, we only implement the public asset insurance only piloting in our ministry, or Ministry of Finance, just only one line ministries, but we have about 80 line ministries, and in the 2022, about 65 line ministries have already implemented the public asset insurance, and the total premium is about 80 billion. Yeah, That's the sum of updated data from that I get from the consortium of the ABMN. And actually, we also have some next steps that we're gonna do in this implementations of the ABMN. The first one is we focus on the accelerating of the implementations. We know that we have a total about 80,000 assets in all around Indonesia, but we only focus on the buildings, especially for the office, for the health, and for the education's building. And we know that the implementation is the most important and uneasy for everyone to implement, because this is the new regulations, and this is the new mechanism for protecting the state asset in Indonesia. So we still have the duty for accelerating the implementations. That's the first one. The second one is about the expanding of the coverage. We know that since what I mentioned just now, that we only insure the buildings, but the insurance instead of assets will be extended to the infrastructure and the vehicles, and that's the hard duty too, because we need to set the new regulations, especially the tailor-made policy, the tailor-made regulations that meet between the government and also the private, like we discussed yesterday with the college from the Swiss as well, and from some college and from some speakers that we already heard. That's the second one. And the next one, what's next? We also want to strengthening the information systems we have. The development of the information systems, we hope that it's not only to help insure the assets, but also for the analytical data. We know that the insurance much talking more about the risk modeling, because the risk modeling is the most important thing to set the tariff, because we know that the regulations or the policy is just not only based on the government, but also to the private sector as well. So yeah, this is the duty to set the right or the exact regulations between the government and the private sector, like the insurance industry. And the last one is about the implementing the pooling fund. Like my colleague says that we now try to set the regulation and the mechanism of the disaster pooling fund based on the DRFI strategy. So if I can share to you that the budget from the ABMN or the public asset insurance is Indonesia is allocated based on each budget of the line ministries. So we hope that the pooling fund can funding or can fund the public asset insurance in the next day, but everything is still in progress. So the integrations, the systems, the regulation is still in progress. We're working on it between the Ministry of Finance and all the policymaker in Indonesia. Well, that's all that I can add from my college, and thank you so much.
Thank you so much from our colleagues from Indonesia. Can we hear from our other colleagues? Malaysia.
Hi, we are from Malaysia. In Malaysia, we don't have any specific policy, for example, like bond issuance or risk transfer, but the management of disaster risks are regulated under the National Disaster Management, as we call it NAMA in Malaysia. And then NAMA was formed as a focal point agency dedicated to managing disaster. And then furthermore, we have established the National Disaster Relief Fund, which help to channel aid to disaster victim, to reduce the risk of disaster, as well to manage disaster victim. This one including the disaster related to the COVID-19 outbreak. And then as of now, we encourage the public and private sector to contribute to the National Disaster Relief Trust Fund. As for finance management, central and state government agencies through their respective agency are responsible to allocate certain funds to manage the disaster and risk reduction. As of now, disaster risk and financing in Malaysia is still manageable internally. That's all.
Okay, thank you so much. How about our colleagues from Laos?
Good morning. We are from Laos. So now we have initiative that adopted my country that to develop of the national disaster risk financings. So now we have strategy is called National Financial Protection Strategy against disaster risk within the period 2022 to 2030, which has been endorsed a couple months ago. So in this strategies comprise many financial instruments to serve for the emergency response, and also state that we have the drift insurance. That is a new initiative, is a new financial instrument that we have. For the next step, we will move forward to do activities that state in the strategy under the implementation plan. So I will.
Yeah, I will add, Kaisamon. As we have the strategy itself, and the strategy is lay out all the foundation that we have to do, but the implementation, we need some concrete activity on that. Beside the strategy, we also have, like she said, that we have CDRIF in place now. We buy the CDRIF since 2021, and it's covered 3 years for the CDRIF. And beside the CDRIF, we also working on the public asset with we have under the CDRIF also, because CDRIF, they also have the public asset financial protection working group on that, so that we also working on that to develop that one. And we will have public asset is one area that we are learning. Beside the public asset, we also try to develop the agriculture insurance, but lately it seems that it's a bit hard. Like my colleague from Vietnam said, that the awareness of the agriculture insurance and the insurance itself is still limited, and the farmer they do not really have the knowledge on the agriculture insurance. That would be from Laos, PDR. But in terms of international cooperation, we also work under the ASEAN Plus 3, also on the DRFI, and also the ASEAN, which would be similar on the priority. So that I think what I can suggest is that maybe these two platforms can share with each other, so that we would have like very maybe diversify priority, or the specific one that's suitable for the ASEAN country, and also plus 3 also. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much. Any additional inputs for the first question? Right. So, which I think we can see that the countries are the different stages of RFI financing with the various focuses. So we heard focus on agriculture. We also heard priorities on infrastructure. So we are at the different levels, so to different stages, so to speak, as far as the initiatives on national disaster risk financing is. So, care to share your thoughts on this before you?
Well, thank you very much, everyone, for sharing the information. So now we know that some countries already have this disaster risk financing program in your country in place, and some still working on it. Some has more priority in the agriculture insurance, and the other sector are still being discussed, and the legal framework still also being developed. I just wondering, is any representative from Singapore that joining us today? Because I remember from the registration list that the Singapore participant. would you mind sharing us a little bit, because I feel like you also have some initiative that could be very interesting for everyone to hear.
I think that in Singapore, we don't really have like natural disaster per se, but then we do face issues like floods, flash floods recently due to like the rising sea levels. So I think for Singapore, it's more on the adaptation efforts that we are having. So for instance, like we are building, we have raised the minimum land reclamation level, as well as we require our building to be built on higher grounds. So we are mostly working on like the adaptation and mitigation efforts. So like our future Changi Airport T5, it will actually be pandemic proof, whereby the terminals can actually be operated as smaller sub-terminals in case of pandemic. And then after that, yeah, it will also be built at a much higher ground per se. Yeah, so we are mostly working on the adaptation and mitigation efforts to stay future proof. Yeah, thanks.
Okay, thank you very much for sharing with us. So like with all the information that we receive from other ASEAN member countries today, it just actually leading us to the next question about you have done a lot and there's some initiative that's already in place, but I am already hearing that there's some more of the support that you may need in a certain area. Can you just help me to elaborate more in terms of identifying the gap that you think it would be the challenge that you're facing, and something that you should be doing but have not yet be able just to do? So can you please, anyone would like just to start first? I'm running the constraint. Anyone would like to? Yeah.
Okay. Like I said earlier, that the gap and the challenges for us in implementation of the DRF solution is the first thing is public awareness of the role and of the role of the insurance against natural disaster. And the second thing is that the political support. I think this is also very important for us, even though we have the legal regulation in place, but without the political support, we can go any further. And also the third thing is that we need to address is the infrastructure for the implementation of DRF solution, such as the database, the modeling, and the development of the auxiliary services such as the actuarial services and other professional in DRF solutions. That is, I think that the three key areas we need to address to foster our DRF solutions. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else for the first question? I think this question has been touched a bit while answering the first question, especially on the progress of their respective initiatives.
Yeah, I would be interested to hear from our colleague from Philippines, though, because it seems like you have done a lot and you're quite advanced when it's come to the RF program in your country. So, but if you really have to identify the gap for the development and the implementation, what would be the most challenging situation right now for the Philippines?
Well, it's the development of ex-ante DRFI instruments, which can bridge the financing gap and which can provide immediate liquidity when a disaster occurs.
Thank you very much. Anything else to add?
Yeah, Pichaya, just to expand on what my colleague just mentioned, I would have to agree with our colleagues from Vietnam. Also, same as in Vietnam, in the Philippines, one of the biggest challenge really is the support that we will need. As discussed earlier, we've established a program, right, that targets the household, the local government unit, and the national level issues. So it's 3 levels. So having said that, everything's defined in a plan, but in implementing a plan, right, you need the people from down below to up to provide support. And in this case, at least from the experience of the Insurance Commission in the Philippines, um, first, there are regulations that need to be amended. And without the support of people in government to change law, it's difficult to implement what has been proposed, right? That's number one. Second, as discussed by our colleagues in Indonesia, they're into analytics now, and they mentioned earlier that the rates for premiums will have to be recalculated. And as I discussed earlier, right, when we recalculated rates and exposed the regulated rates for cat risk, there was a lot of pushback from the players saying that this will kill the industry, no one will buy. So I think it's really also that awareness that our colleagues from Vietnam has mentioned earlier. That's very important. And again, if you're talking about disaster, catastrophe, risk financing, with respect to the role of, number one, the national government, like the Ministry of Finance, and the regulator for insurance, sometimes it's difficult because even in the Philippines, we as regulator, we need to only look at the private, right, companies that operate. But when you're talking about DRFI at a national level, then our colleagues from the Department of Finance will have to defer to us and get inputs from us to provide insight on, for example, the operations of the Philippine Crop Insurance Corporation, which is not under the jurisdiction of the Insurance Commission, since it is a government-owned company, or other government institutions that provide social insurance. So the role on how we work with the ministry and the powers that are delegated to us have to be clearly identified, so that at least when we move, then we can coordinate with the right stakeholder and move forward with whatever it is that we have to do. So again, really, political support, awareness of all stakeholders, number one, review of laws, policies that we currently have that may contradict or restrict actions that would enable us to implement a program, and definitely some changes in law or regulation. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ferdinand. That's very comprehensive answer, and it's interesting just to know. I think it's not only the Philippines that have this sort of problem in terms of coordination among the agency, the clear function of each agency and how to make this smooth implementation happen, because it's related to so many stakeholders. I like just to move to maybe our colleague from Indonesia, because you mentioned about pooling fund that's already being developed, but then it's still ongoing. You encounter any challenges or anything that you think should be done faster, but we haven't really but your country cannot really yet proceed? Anything that you can share with us?
For pooling fund, I think similar problem, yeah, because we for pooling fund we need to decide how much money that they should raise and accumulate per year, so we can have enough money for disaster. And then if we want to have that that amount to be declared, we have to have a good risk assessment and a good risk modeling, but we lack of expert in-house. I think what ASEAN-DRFI done is a very good, but with the support from the NTU, but we need like NTU team in our country, more people like Professor Tan and team in our country as well. That's what we need. So experts in house to make a good risk assessment, to make a good risk modeling, so we know how much money that we should need and how much money we should provide for disaster. Another thing is data. I think NTU have a difficult time when try to get data from Indonesia, because we ourselves have a difficult time to gather so many data, because yes, so many stakeholders to be involved in disaster management and disaster financing. What else? And technology as well. That would be very very good if we have sophisticated technology to help us in the pooling fund for disaster to be they can they can disperse the money fast and a more transparent and accountable way. I think another thing is this is internal. I don't know. We maybe need to study how Philippines do with the role of subnational government. So we try to increase their role in financing for disaster. We want them to chip in the pooling fund for disaster since the pre-disaster stage, but we have difficulties in formulate how much money should they chip in, because different region, different subnational have different risk index and different fiscal capacity. So we have to deal with that, and we have to deal with how will their willingness to chip in to that's currently our struggle in the pooling fund for disaster. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Before I let you go, I have one more question, because from my recollection, Indonesia also have catastrophe bond. Am I correct?
Not yet. We
okay.
yeah, we are studying that. Yeah, we well, our strategy for the DRFI, we developed it in 2018. Actually, we want to update it like regularly. So we add more instrument to that. We want to well, we are actively participate in CDRI for public asset protection to see how this can complement our state what our public asset insurance, and we also want to cat bonds, cat DDO, or other instrument out there. How can we utilize that and to put it in our mix of instrument? But yeah, we haven't got this catastrophic bonds, but we currently discuss that. We work closely with World Bank as well in this disaster pooling fund, and also to learn more about the cat bonds.
Thank you so much for sharing with us. So given a limited of time constraint that we have, I'd just like to move to the next question, which actually been answered from some of you already, but I wanna circle maybe to our colleague from Malaysia, because you haven't really shared much about of the gap, but also maybe you can share in one round in terms of what's the challenge that you experience in to develop your national disaster risk financing program, as well as it was any kind of the support that the country may need.
As I mentioned before, we don't have any specific DRF program or anything. But I think for us, the most important thing if we want to implement the DRF solution is how we want to do the risk assessment, especially on the public asset. That's all.
Hi, so perhaps I could add a bit further from the private solution perspective. I'm from the Central Bank of Malaysia, and we look at both from the regulatory perspective as well as the development perspective. So I think in the context of providing or proliferating more private solutions in the market, definitely one of the gaps would be data availability. And I think similar to all the rest of the other countries, we've got a lot of data, but the integration of data is really critical. So how could we capitalize on that? And because data sits across different ministries, we've got probably China walls to work with, but I think moving towards an open data system may help in the future. So that data could be kind of disseminated pretty fast. So that's in terms of product development. So besides product development, perhaps would be the claims payout, and similar as other countries as well, when it comes to disaster, payouts in a fast and efficient manner helps as well. So how do we make that more efficient from private players to the households or businesses, and whether or not we could leverage on different channels to make that happen. So I think some of our colleagues talked about leveraging on subnationals. So likewise, in Malaysia, maybe that sort of arrangement would help. So that's really briefly in terms of private solutions, and I'm sure there's more that we could discuss about. But I think in terms of the support needed, I think I would also resonate with our member countries about better stakeholder cooperation across agencies. And sometimes I guess it may help having people from an independent organization like the ADBI to bring stakeholders together and having a discussion, and definitely technical expertise. That's where we could leverage on technical expertise from the ADB or the other sort of organizations, not only to fix structural issues, but as well as think about innovative and forward solutions and in our market. So basically, probably would want to agree with what our colleagues have been mentioning, but technical expertise is definitely one of the key areas that could help us as well.
Well, thank you so much. That's very helpful comment, and just to help us to understand more. So just want to circle back to our colleague from Thailand, OIC or MOF, just for these two questions, just because you said, even though you don't really have the DRF solution in Thailand just yet, but more of the focus is on the agri-crop insurance. But then again, hearing from our colleagues from different countries, ASEAN, can you share with us, do you have any, have you experienced any challenges the similar way, or is there anything differently that you experience, even though in what sector, like agriculture sector insurance?
Wait a moment. If about crop insurance experience, so we have to work together with many organizations. So and I think the bank for the farmer is a key issue to lead the farmer come to the crop insurance program. We have the rice insurance program and maize insurance program, and we have two scheme for crop insurance, like is compensation and volunteer scheme. So the I think the crop insurance program in Thailand quite successful because the farmer have to have to do loan with the bank for the farmer, and they will get the crop insurance for free, and government and bank for the farmer will subsidize the premium for them. Yeah. And yeah.
Okay, so that's very interesting initiative, because just correct me if I'm wrong, because my understanding is just so basically what OIC and helping with the agri crop insurance is just to encourage the farmer to get the loan from a bank, and then so in that case they can just get the free premium for that agricultural crop and products, right? Am I correct? So that's why it's spread wide and helping the farmer better in terms of.
Yes.
Okay.
But the OIC we have to approve the insurance policy for this program. Yeah.
So do you think that is there enough awareness about the importance of the risk transferring to or the insurance when it's come to any disaster affected transaction?
Yeah, I think we should to approve, like we have to not approve. We have to support more the farmer to come to the program by volunteer more than, because we would like to decrease the cost of government to help them, because they have to more awareness by themselves. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing with us. I think we for the benefit of the time, I like to go to the last question, and I couldn't help myself but have to circle back to our colleague from Lao PDR. So this question basically is just to ask about how can ASEAN country leverage the existing initiative for the developing region disaster risk finance solutions. So because our colleague from Lao PDR already mentioned that they are the member of the CDRIP, and with this involvement in the implementation. So what do you think, is there any response that you would like to share with us for this question?
Thank you, Pichaya, for allowing us to share the experience. I think CDF itself is a good mechanism that we can utilize it, but as of now, we have many member country, but they are not engaged in the product yet. So that I think this would be another alternative ex-ante financing a solution that member country can think of, because is one that is risk transfer that would be option, because but something that we need to improve for the CDF itself is the experience on the implementation, as we is a new mechanism, and we are learning now, also learning from the mechanism, and the CDF insurance company also learning from us, so that now we are trying to improve the operations. After we share the experience, I think thing is getting better, and I think it's good to try for other member country. As CDF itself, now we have one product on the flat, and they will have also further product if our member country like to have, like others, like earthquake or something that would be add to that one. Personally, I think that is a good starting point for us to learn new mechanism beside what we used to have, like export financing. This one is another level that we can learn, and I think for Lao PDR is a good chance to learn. And beside the CDF itself, is also have another product that we can think of, because CDF itself is not only the service provider, but is also a technical assistant over there also. Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much, Khun Somsen, and it's nice to see you after a while. So I think, is there any other participant want to give some comment on this last question? Because I don't want to circle back to Indonesia again, because the idea is just that, because I know that Indonesia is going to be the chair of the ASEAN next year, and not sure if you have any response or any idea about the existing initiative that we're having right now and how to leverage that.
Yeah, of course, it's nice to have many options. Yeah, and if CDRIF can provide something that, yeah, like CDRIF promise something that we need, it will be great. But probably right now it's not as fast as we expected, because as you can see, for like the working group for technical working group for public asset protection, for example, we have some challenge in our laws about how to buy product from other countries. So yeah, so technical assistance, dialogue, sharing experience. We need that more before we really come to the discussion about the product itself. So I think you know, the beneficiaries speed is not donor speed, so we have to do it together and help us. I think and it's what else? It's about how we want to connect these three Asian DRFI, CDRIF, and also ASEAN plus 3 DRFI working group 3. This is also our I don't know for me itself. This is personal. This is personal opinion, not country opinion. I think ASEAN-DRFI it's I like it more because I don't know, because it's how to say it in correct way. I think the pace is better as well, and I think sharing experience and technical assistance is very rich. I hope this can be done also in the ASEAN plus 3 working group 3 and also in CDRIF. I think that's all from Indonesia.
Thank you so much. I just wondering if there's any participant from the MHA working group here that can share with us about the ADMIR initiative. If is anyone that's from the disaster management agency? Well, if not, it's okay. Because I want to just go back again to the Philippines, just because on this last question, do you see any regional initiative that you think you can leverage to support your own national disaster risk financing program? Because you mentioned before that your national programs already in line with the ADRFI, but would there be any value added for you too for this initiative?
Well, we've received a lot of trainings and seminars already, right? And we appreciate the fact that, you know, events like this provide us with, again, more insights on how to move things forward. Now, having said that, I think we'll just have to continue to push people in government to look at, you know, the issues and address them one by one. As our colleagues from Indonesia said, you know, you can't do this overnight. It doesn't happen, you know, just as fast as we want to. But then again, we'll just have to continue pushing, right? Probably an area that would provide further impetus to push this forward is to, you know, have this organization just keep on repeating and repeating and repeating, you know, that, you know, programs are good and only as good as we implement them. You know, when we stop, you know, writing these plans and programs, they remain so it's nothing, right? And I think to keep the discussions alive and as we continue to talk about it, I think it will help slowly, right? Earlier I had a discussion with one of my colleagues who used to head the FSL, and I asked about, you know, the CDRIF program, and he was telling me, well, you know, like just like in the Philippines, you know, they've had challenges because, you know, some countries have issues that they need to resolve before we implement something. And then I was telling him, you know what, I've had the opportunity before to visit Turkey and observe their earthquake pool. You know, that started as a loan. It started as a loan for Turkey, I think 300 million or so, and now it's more than $1 billion in capital. I mean, again, we tried to replicate that in the Philippines, but as I mentioned earlier, you know, the challenges with the law, with the buy-in of the stakeholders, it's really just so difficult, really. So I don't know, probably more talks and seminars would help, and probably more exchanges among countries, so that we would also see the other side of things. Because, you know, as mentioned earlier, sometimes we get proposals and in the end we look at it, oh, it's just a loan. But in reality, that loan, if handled well, you know, can grow into something big, as what has happened with the, you know, Turkish pool, right? And I think that was an ADB or World Bank loan. I'm not I don't remember. That's it.
Thanks so much, Ferdinand. And I think we has coming to the end of this panel discussion. We heard a lot. We have done some stock taking for today's session, learn about what each country has been doing, what's ongoing. And it seemed like there's a lot of overlapping when it's come to the challenges that the countries has been facing. So I hope this information can help us to advance our discussion and sharing thought, brainstorm in our next session on the brainstorming. So, Renz, do you have any last word before we close this section?
Yeah, actually, I just wanted to reiterate that these kinds of activities, like what has been mentioned yesterday as well, that I think it's really important to keep the dialogue alive, keep the discussion alive as far as disaster risk financing is concerned, so that keep our stakeholders and our colleagues engaged, basically, in the area of disaster risk financing. So that's all. And thank you for all the inputs this morning. I hope we keep this momentum as we go on to our brainstorming session this morning. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I think we're handing the floor back to Connor.
No, perfect. Thanks so much. It really was an interesting conversation to listen to. And okay, I guess two sort of elements that I found most insightful from my perspective is one, that there's clearly an interest and frankly a need when we think about the broader question around capabilities. And this isn't on the sort of technical facility or instrument capabilities, but rather some of the foundational aspects within our respective jurisdictions. And what I mean by that is, you know, it's clear that data is a perennial problem. It's like that flower in your garden. It keeps coming back. We're very happy to see it, but unfortunately, it's very difficult to do much other than just to wait to bear witness to it. And I think that from my perspective, one of the things that when we think about some of the benefits that can come from regional cooperation and collaboration is to identify concrete ways in which we can collectively address some of the challenges that we face on the data side. And I think that what we hear, the experiences within one jurisdiction, are not all that different from the experiences in another jurisdiction. Data is a challenge, and it's a challenge across the region, in countries, within institutions, frankly, within the industry. It's a big challenge. And so if there's an opportunity here for steps to be taken, you know, data is clearly an area where, you know, collectively there is probably some potential to hopefully, as we say, move the needle slightly. The second thing is on the analytics side. You know, once we have the data, what do you do with it? And I think that that's one of the things that, again, you know, regional efforts to improve analytic capabilities and to learn from each other and to learn from our respective experiences within our jurisdiction, and providing platforms to enable that sharing. I think it's critically important. The last thing that I would highlight, and this is on the capability side again, that technology piece, and this came up from Indonesia, and this is, I think something that really does permeate throughout all of the challenges that we face, is how do we maximize the utilization and benefit that we can extract from some of the technological advancements that we're seeing. And these are wide ranging. It's the analytic capabilities, it's the frictionless payments, it's the transparency of payments. It really is something where I think that there's probably efforts that are underway within each of our respective jurisdictions to improve the utilization of technology. And frankly, some of the advancements that we've seen, particularly in the last few years, where we had a forced rapid digitization of almost all business processes, technology has and utilization of it has increased significantly. Cashless payments, significant uptake across the region. The other piece that I would highlight, and this is something that the implementation side of things is frankly quite interesting for me. We talked about this yesterday. We heard again, Benedict's overview. This was and is and will remain a key challenge. And so what I would say on the implementation side is that really there is, I think, opportunity again to learn from each other, to understand how jurisdictions are approaching this. Having worked in federal provincial relations in Canada before, or in the early part of my career, I can say that there is a lot of power that comes from being able to identify the steps that your neighbors are taking, and being able to use that to actually encourage action within your respective jurisdictions. And be it a sort of competitive pressure that exists between politicians and policymakers, I'm not going to lie, it is there. It can be very helpful. And so having platforms that enable you to actually share what you're doing and understand comprehensively what your colleagues in other locations are doing can be very helpful in terms of building that political sort of will to take the necessary steps. Legislation, regulation, these things are hard, and you need all the help that you can get. The last thing that I would just say is that, there really is also, and I think it was our colleague from Bank Negara who mentioned it, this ability of independent organizations to be able to support the convening of necessary stakeholders. And, I think that there's a multitude of organizations that are out there that are quite keen. ADBI, of course, being one, GIP, as we sort of develop and mature as an organization, would be another, but there's countless others. And I think it is true that the opportunity to utilize the good offices of independent organizations who can help in terms of convening the necessary stakeholders. This is something that I think all of us recognize is really important, and particularly in the complex institutional arrangements that exist within a number of our respective countries. I think I heard correctly, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but our friends in Indonesia said something along the lines of 80 line ministries. So that would make for some complex institutional dynamics within your country. Yes. So it is important that when we think about stakeholders, we think about how we can utilize the support that's out there to help us in terms of navigating or convening and navigating some of the complexity that comes from policy making and policy execution within some of the arrangements and structures within our respective countries. So really interesting conversation. Great to hear. Look forward to our next session. I recognize we're a little bit late. Again, you can report me on the survey, failing in my job as moderator, but we can still take 15 minutes. Tim's nodding, so that's good. So we'll reconvene at 5 to 11. Thanks, everyone. And based on what I saw with the first session, despite the fact that it was the first session on the second day, there seems to be a lot of energy in the room now, which is great. And hopefully that continues to this next session. We've got 3 facilitators for the session, all 3 of whom you've met. We have Pachaya, of course, who's joining us from a location far away. We have David, who's sitting to my right, and we have Benedict, who's standing very tall in the corner of the room. So with that, I'll turn it over to Pachaya, who will introduce the session and how it will run. Thanks, Pachaya.
Thank you so much, Connor, and good morning again, everyone. So, like I suggested in the last section, like we stock take what's going on and what's the challenges and what you want for the support. So this section will be more like a brainstorming section. We would do things a little bit different. I don't think I have to introduce David and Benedict anymore because you know of them and you heard them yesterday too. So let's go. Can you just go to the next slide? So I want to do a little bit of the different for this section. Instead of go around the room, we would like just to have like a small exercise with all of you. So the objective basically just to identify the current challenge and policy priorities, kind of similar to the last discussion a little bit, but then there will be more context adding into which I show you later on, and also want to discuss the way forwards, how to advance this ADRFI roadmap implementation. So the exercise would be like to have 45 minutes for all of us to spend to discuss at your own table with the member in your own table, and then to answer a set of questions that I will share with you shortly. And after 45 minutes, then we would ask for one representative from each group to give us and sharing your answer with everyone in the room. And then we will wrap up with some discussion and summarize the outcome of the priority and also what we would like, what the ASEAN member country would like for the support to further the implementation. So let's just go to the next slide, please. So so this is this assess up the question that we would like for you to do for the exercise this morning, and we would spend 45 minutes. So before we go to the exercise, I would like just to turn the floor to both David and Benedict. Do you have anything to add before we go to the exercise?
Sorry, I have something to add, but actually not related to the exercise. Just a quick point coming out from the session this morning. You heard a lot about, it's clear coming from some people in the room that the need for more supports, technical support and practical supports in developing and implementing programs is required. Now, there are many people who can help you. We talked about the Asian Development Bank, we talked about the World Bank, we talked about GAPE. I should probably mention a couple of institutions which you may not be aware of, who do have access to funding, international funding. So they can actually implement, not just talk, but also implement. One actually has been kind of referred to obliquely by Mr. Hui from Vietnam, where there's a group called the Tripartite Agreements, which includes the Insurance Development Forum, which is a group of insurance companies, reinsurers and brokers, including ourselves, WTW and Swiss Re, who actually can get together on a non-competitive basis to actually advise governments on disaster risk transfer. So we can begin to formulate technically, help you on the modeling side, help you on the structuring side, and help you kind of formulate a policy which can work. That program, which includes the UNDP as well, and the ISF, the Insure Resilience Solution Fund, which is a German funding pot, they actually are working with Vietnam on potential projects, which actually hopefully will go live next year to extend the work of the ADB and the World Bank on city resilience. Actually, it was mentioned in terms of the UNDP project. In fact, it's a tripartite project. That funding pot is available and can be accessed directly through any insurance company member, so ourselves or Swiss Re. So if you are interested in that pot of money, which is available to be used, and they're looking for countries to help, then please do contact us. And the other one is actually, I'm leaving. I have to leave here quite quickly after the session today to go to Pakistan. And that's another funding pot, which is called the Global Risk Modeling Initiative. And that's, again, German money, largely, but that's an initiative around the IDF, Insurance Development Forum, explicitly about helping countries develop catastrophe risk models. And again, that is funded. And again, they're looking for projects. They're looking for projects to fund. So that's the reason I'm going to Pakistan. Pakistan is one potential beneficiary of that modeling initiative. So again, if that type of work interests you, then please contact me or any of my colleagues in the IDF, and we can then actually begin to think about perhaps helping you to use that money. Sorry, perhaps we should move forward.
Vijay, if I can add something before we go into the discussion groups. And I have the luxury of not being affiliated to an institution anymore. It's nice to have that. So the one thing I would say is, as you think about those questions, be very specific and be very demanding what is useful to you. Because there's lots of organizations, ADB, ADBI, GIP, World Bank, insurance companies, IDF, UNDP, everyone out there, they all have ideas about what you should do. And we all run around the world trying to sell you something with the best of intentions about what we think is good for you. But at the end of the day, be very specific, because you know what you need, and you know what you need to implement much better than all of us together. We can give you technical advice and technical solutions, but at the end of the day, it has to make your work easier. And what you do every day when you go to office, those are the problems you're solving, and you need to know what helps make them more efficient. So be very specific when you think about this, and be very demanding afterwards when you go back to ADB, ADBI, GIP, or anyone else about what you actually want. And then put it in a work plan, put it in a list, and put a request in. But think on these things as you go through this in the end as well, right? What should it be? Also, as it flows into the ADRFI Phase 3 discussions, which I believe are taking place tomorrow, or the uptake this week, ASEAN +3 later this month, CDRIF whenever you next engage. so that you are actually driving those conversations and you tell all the other partners what it is you want out of this. Thanks. Vijaya, back to you, or?
Thank you. I think I don't have anything more to add, just the benefit of the time. Like, I think we can just go ahead with the group discussion. It would take roughly about 45 minutes, but we're running out a little bit behind the schedule. So maybe let's just go ahead now and spend 45 minutes on your discussion on this question. And if you have question, you have Benedict and David there with you. So feel free to ask the question, or even if you want to ask question to me, use the microphone. I'm always here.
So, it's a lot of questioning faces. Is everyone clear on? So it's 45 minutes to discuss within your table those 5 questions, go through those 5 questions to think about what are the main objectives that, especially think about regional collaboration, regional cooperation at RIFI, ASEAN+3, CDRIF, and how an organization like ADB, ADBI, and GIP can support that. Go through the steps of what is your main objective, what are some of the key challenges that this regional cooperation should address, could help you address. How can this be implemented? What should it link to in country? So as we discussed, money is only one part of this. What can it build on, and what are the specific activities, actions that you would like to see on an ADRFI Phase 3 work plan, on a ADB funded support to your country, on an ASEAN+3 work plan?
Hello, everyone. How are we doing? Do you think we're ready just to share your thought on this question now?
Hi, Pichaya. Can you hear us?
Hi. Yeah, I can hear you.
Perfect. Shall we go into a feedback sessions around the tables to share with Pichaya, with Connor, and then with Thomas as well afterwards, what you would like to see and what would be useful for you to help you implement your priorities and actions and activities. Which side of the room shall we start? Philippines or Thailand? No volunteers? Well, I'm close to the Philippines.
Hello. Yeah. So good morning, everyone. So I'm Nino from the Philippines. So on question number 1, we identified that our focus shall be on the infrastructure, particularly on the transmission lines of electricity in the Philippines. So there are some of these are some of the critical assets that are not yet covered by insurance in the Philippines. For number 2, our main financial challenge in disaster response would be the lack of available usable data. Okay. And then the operational preparedness mechanism should this link to is about number 1, the data analytics for product development as well as for the asset registry. Then number 2, the funding source for insurance premium payment. Because if there's no good data, the premium would definitely be high. Then number 3, the mechanism for quick loss assessment tool. So in the Philippines, normally if there's a typhoon, it took us maybe around 1 week or maybe a month to determine how much is the actual loss for that particular disaster. And of course, the quick payment loss mechanism. So maybe we could leverage on the use of technology, or maybe we could explore the use of parametric insurance. And then on the number 4, we think that right now there's no existing mechanism instrument related to the insurance of transmission lines of electricity in the Philippines. And on number 4, what activities should the regional cooperation focus on to achieve the above priorities? So for us, it's about exchange of best practices and experiences from different ASEAN member states, and as well as from our developmental partners. So that's all from the Philippines.
Thank you, Nino. Any questions to the Philippines?
Just to ask one question. When you say data, what data?
Well, data basically we do not have any information on what to be insured, particularly on the transmission lines in the power sector. So basically that's it. It's like very shallow for us. We do not know what to insure. Basically that's it.
Okay. No, that's very helpful. Thank you.
So more specific to what he said, it's really, I'm sure we have information from the different offices of government, right? Like the Department of Energy or the National Electrification Administration, except that these are not organized in a manner that would be useful for us to develop a product, right? To provide cover for all of these assets. Now, what you have to understand is that in the Philippines, there's actually 2 levels of transmission of the grid, right? There's the main grid, which is currently being operated by a private company. So we're not as much concerned with that because they're obligated to have that, covered by insurance. What we are concerned about is what we call the electric cooperatives that actually powers 20% or 30% of the rest of the country that is not covered by the grid. And this is composed of approximately 152 electric cooperatives in the Philippines. And the moment, their lines are hit by typhoon, power is an indispensable utility, right? For anything in our lives, just like water. And then we think that if we can focus on this, then, we could help communities go back to, living their normal lives immediately after a catastrophic event. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you so much.
So it's really data on the assets and data on to develop a product, right?
Yeah. And the reason that I probed a little bit is because it is an interesting challenge. And, particularly when you frame it like that, there's definitely the challenge of data on the assets. But there's also the challenge of data on the impact.
Right. So that's why we were saying, we also need all of these analytical tools, right? In projecting, forecasting, damage. And then, of course, after the event itself, right? In assessing what the actual damage is, unless we use, a parametric insurance product, which makes, things a lot simpler, right?
Great. Yeah. Thank you.
Right. Sometimes I see you laughing. You have something to share. Are you a spokesperson?
Hi, Jonathan from ASEC. I just want to share that based on this table discussions, which are from Laos, PDR, and Indonesia, for question number 1, I think the table agreed that the key objectives are to expand on agricultural sectors and insurance to cover poor households in case of natural disasters. For question number 2, I think similar to the Philippines, data availabilities are also mentioned on the table. Also, there is factors such as inefficient access to financial markets, and also their domestic law and regulations. For number 3, operational preparedness, there is a need to expand and increase human resources capacities and capabilities. Therefore, there are more capacity buildings and perhaps technical assistance is needed. For number 4, from Laos and Indonesia, there are all existing mechanism. Although there are a mechanism in place, but then I think other initiatives are also needed because in case of Laos PDR, currently they only have coverage for flood under the SIDRIF. And also Indonesia was saying that agricultural insurance needed to be expanded into a broader context. On number 5, again, I think a closer cooperation for sharing experiences and knowledge sharing would be one of the priority, and also expanded capacity buildings to upgrade or increases humans resources. I think that's all.
Thank you, Jonathan. Any questions? Well, I have a question. Since you talk about Laos and Indonesia, but you actually have ASEAN Secretariat as well, Jonathan. what's the ASEAN Secretariat's viewpoint? And I guess you work as the stewards of ADRFI for the last 8 years. What's been? Are there any thoughts on this, any reflections on this? Maybe also, what do you think, how you can best bring member states together and work with them and support them in these agendas? Is there anything to share from the Secretariat's point of view?
Thank you. Yeah, I think ASEC would definitely facilitate the members' discussions, but I think from our as an organization, the whole organizations, we also facilitating discussion with other organizations, other divisions, also other sectoral bodies, from agriculture, from disasters management, AHA Center. Yeah, so basically, and of course, we will support Indonesia chairmanship for next year, and align other initiatives on other platforms such as the ASEAN +3, so then that we can avoid duplications, advancing the current established platform, and yeah, again, to support member countries through ADRFI, through SIDRIF, through AAMER funds, and also to also support the AHA centers and try to maximize each other's functions and avoid duplications.
Thank you, Jonathan. I think that, and especially that view across not just different initiatives, but different sectors is super important. So I can ask you one more thing quickly. And speak to Pichaya and to Connor. What do you want from them? As in, what do you need to support this implementation? What would you like from them?
Yeah. Yeah, I think more capacity buildings activities. That one thing that we can ask from ADBI, such as a workshop like this one, that if it could be intensified, focusing on I think from the stable agricultural sector would be one of the main issues, because of the a lot of the populations here are actually farmer, and agriculture is an important sector, I think, and opening the access to more perhaps private insurance to get involved in this area would be good. I think, yeah, that's all.
If I may add on the training program or capacity building program that we could have for the support. I think we know the concept of ex-ante financing, that it would be good, but the real implementation or the practical how to use it, we still do not have that experience. If the ADBI or others development partner can have to share experience, or to have the case study to share with us on the instrument, how it implemented and cost and then benefit of that would be very helpful and illustrate what we have to do in the futures. Thank you.
Thank you, Samsa and Jonathan. Right, Pichai, if you have questions, let us know, right? I know it's always hard being on screen and locked away, far away. Right, we have a mix of Vietnam, Malaysia, Singapore.
I got volunteered by my team. I think one thing we would want to acknowledge is that on this table, we've got very different countries. We've got Vietnam, we've got Malaysia, and we've got Singapore. And the sets of challenges that we're all facing are very, very different. But I think we'll probably take the example of Vietnam, because I think they've got quite a lot of programs happening at this point in time, and my colleagues from Vietnam would share more. But if we were to go by questions in terms of key objectives, I think even for all three countries, we would agree that fiscal protection is the priority of all governments. But if we were to zoom down into specific target sectors, then, for example, in Vietnam, it would be agriculture because a lot of their business, a lot of their people are in this sector. So just to give a comparison for Malaysia, because more than 90% of our economy is driven by SMEs, then SMEs may be our focus. But again, if we want to drill down into specific sectors of SMEs, then that's where it gets a little bit more complicated. We've got manufacturing, we've got services, we've also got agriculture, so to speak. But yes, for the purposes of this exercise, we would focus on fiscal protection and specifically on agriculture sector. So that's for the first question. In terms of the main challenges, so we'll probably keep it a little bit broader instead of financial challenges. By and large, I think in the context of agriculture, the lack of funds is definitely something which is of most priority. So again, going back to the context of Vietnam, how could we ensure sufficient funds to adequately protect our agriculture people? And also to support that, I think it was mentioned data and analytics would also be helpful. I guess that is in terms of processes. How can we make it more efficient? With data analytics, then probably we know who to disperse to and whatnot and be a bit more targeted. But ultimately, it all points back to having sufficient funds. So for question number 3, in terms of operational mechanisms, I guess it's still quite open, again, in the context of agriculture. So if we would want to leverage on public institutions, then having relevant stakeholders in the entire process, from getting the funds to payouts, and all of these public institutions, meaning your agencies, your subnationals, or even your village heads, that would be quite critical to bring them onto the table. But if we're talking about private insurance, then I think that's a different ball game altogether. I think getting the right players, leveraging on their different channels, probably through agents, probably that would be something that we could think of. But I think in the context of Vietnam, we were thinking more from the public institutions route to kind of operationalize the financial management of disaster. Sorry. So just really briefly on the third question, we honestly had a little bit of trouble answering this question because it really depends on the route that we're taking. So we kind of left it at very broad levels at this point in time. So right now, I'll probably pass it on to my colleague from Vietnam to explain a little bit more in terms of their existing mechanisms and what they could probably request more from our stakeholders.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for pointing me. Okay, so as we said to you that we have different people from different countries. So each country have different priority, different objective, and they also have different mechanism existing in their own jurisdiction. So for Vietnam, like I said to you early this morning, that currently we are running the national program on agricultural insurance, and it has been in place for 3 years. Before that, we also doing a pilot program in 2011 to 2013, and from 2019 to now, up to now, we running the national program. But the result has not been, for us, has not been successfully that, and So we need to ask for further support to make that program successfully, especially in terms of raising awareness, and also in terms of capacity building, especially on insurance product development, because right now we have the agriculture insurance for rice, and for livestock, and also for aquaculture. And for livestock it's quite okay, but for crop, for rice insurance, we have the problem with the insurance product we offer right now. The current insurance product we use, Bio Index as a trigger for payment, and we have the problem with the people from the local authority. They because we use the index insurance product, so we got the basis risk. So sometimes some people in some households, they did not suffer from the disaster, but they got the payment. And sometimes the people, they suffer a lot from the disaster, they got nothing from the payment. So we got a lot of complaints from the local authority, and they want to go with a traditional indemnity product. So we got stuck on that. Whether or not we go with indemnity or traditional indemnity product, or we go with index product. Even though the index product would provide a lot of advantage over the traditional indemnity, but the basis risk is still there, and it's not a lot. It's not only a problem of extra load, but also the problem of political issue. So we need to have support to design the right product. It is suitable with our political and social environment and concrete condition for Vietnam. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? All right. Have a last table, Thailand and Indonesia.
Okay. The first question, what the key objective? I think all of public asset is important, and but if we have limit of the fund, maybe we prefer agricultural sector, and poor household is priority. Yeah, but the second question, the main challenge, the main financial challenge, we think maybe about data analytical, and we some or discussion we think it's about lack of fund, because we don't know exactly the fund to use for the when the damage happen. And now in Thailand, the government organization we separate to work, and in each organization, I think if they can share or join some information together, I think it will be useful. So, and the maybe skip the third question, will be fourth and fifth question. For fourth question, in Thailand, we have the two way for help the people when have the damage. like they will get the money from the insurance and they will get the money from the government will help them after the disaster happen. And for the Indonesia, they she said they have the pooling fund for the disaster. Maybe she will share about this later. And for the last question about the activity, I think if many countries have to share experience or have the training together about the technology they use for the data collective in the area and analyze the data, like to predict the disaster and to predict the loss, like how much fund we need after the disaster happen. Yeah, I think it is important. So maybe we will let Indonesia, maybe she can share about the pooling fund for the disaster in their country.
Anything to add?
Actually, what pooling fund already said, but yeah, for I think ASEAN-DRFI is on the right track. Like I said before, but personally, I just want to, like, when the public goods that right now being prepared, once it's ready and we can use it, the next step is how to help each country to duplicate that in each area. So like how to clone Professor Tan to each of the country. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I ask a question to everyone before we go back to, well, actually the first, any questions to our friends from Thailand and from Indonesia? I have a general question to everyone. We heard very repeatedly about capacity building, training, learning, and data and analytics. Could anyone share from your point of view, what would be the most effective way of actually doing training and sharing analytics, right? Training can mean many different things. It can mean more workshops like this. It can mean webinars. It can mean sending you a book. It can mean sending you to university. It can be all sorts of different things. What's most effective? Does anyone wants to share on that? Udevi, I see you have something in your mind.
I think internship could be one thing. Another thing is internship.
Internship. Interesting.
For example, internship in yeah, and then other things could be scholarship, maybe one or two people from what the main unit that working on this. And intensive dialogue is also important. Thank you.
Connor, I hope you took note of the internship. I think that's a perfect thing for GIP, since you deal with insurance industry everywhere. You can be a clearinghouse and facilitator, maybe.
We should talk.
Just a thought. Anyone else wants to share what would be the most useful way for you to actually learn and engage in capacity building activities? Yes, definitely. And Pichai, I think scholarships is something that ADBI is very good at.
Yeah. Well, Benedict, for me, I think it's really a mix of a number of things, but definitely, you know, an exchange program would be most beneficial. But what I found better than just, you know, the internship or residency or exchange program is that you mix it with forums like this, where we get to meet, you know, our counterparts in other jurisdictions as well, you know, go through a process of case discussions, and then have, you know, the same people be sent off to different, areas to experience how it is, how they analyze things, how they the structures that they have in operationalizing whatever it is that they undertake. And I just like to share, I had an experience with the NAIC. They have a program that lasts, I think, 6 to 8 weeks, which is actually a mixture of in-class sessions, seminars with a mix of people from different jurisdictions, after which, they farm people out to a fellowship program with different, regulators, at least in the US. But for things like this, it could be, insurance companies as well, right? Not just, other regulators and I don't know, probably whatever institute you may have. But yeah, a mix of that, because the experience really enriches, when one returns to his, jurisdiction, if he could implement, stuff like, and probably the level should be senior or supervisory level up. I mean, you don't have to send your commissioner, right? Or your deputy, managers, supervisors, and probably senior young people who will have, a future in the department, who can grow and, in the future have a power to make decisions and implement things. That would, be a good preparatory, learning for us.
Thank you. I think you're setting out nice blueprints for Connor and Pichaya to brainstorm on. Can I ask the same question around data and analytics? Would it be most useful to have expert providers work with you to provide you analytics, give you numbers, give you risk maps or outputs? Would it be more useful to have somebody work with you to go through how to set up your own analytics, how to do your own data collection? Or would it be maybe more useful to have open tools or open platforms available and disseminated to regional organizations? Any thoughts on what would be the best way? Who wanted more data and analytics? Nobody anymore. Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Benedict. Well, in my mind, talking about the data analytic, there's two problems here. The first one is about the completeness, and the second one is the accuracy of the data. So I think this is the basic or the foundations to make the exact or the right modeling risk in the insurance, perhaps for the tariff and for another thing. So how can perhaps the ADBI provide something, programs that can enhance our knowledge or experience on how to prepare and how to solve these two problems, the accuracy and the completeness, and after that perhaps of the modeling risk. In my perspective, perhaps there's so many modeling risk methods that should be implemented in a different country or a different situations, and how can this to be perhaps a one thing that can be implemented in one region like in Asia or something like that. But yeah, the point is just to before we're talking about the modeling risk and the tariff, like David said yesterday, we think or I think personally I think that there's two issues that should be addressed here: the accuracy and completeness. And I think it's not only in Indonesia. The problem is perhaps in another country too, because the database is, I think the database is the most important and the foundations for that modeling risk. Well, that's all from me, Ben. Over to you.
Thank you. So really starting with the basics of data collection and improving data. And yes, you said at the end, data storage management as well in database. Thank you. Anyone else? David, otherwise, maybe you want to share anything? Well, then back to Pichaya.
I've been hearing a lot, and then it seemed like we need everyone kind of think that the capacity building is the priority, and thanks for sharing or this thought about in which area. For us, ADBI, it's I think you know the nature of ADBI is just to provide a capacity building and training program. In terms of scholarship, we don't really have much just yet, but from what I'm hearing is also maybe there's some part that related to ADB in terms of providing technical assistance, and that would fit better when you're talking about exchange program or like internship, those kind of thing. Like you mentioned, GAIP may have such capacity for the internship too. But my question would be more like, we've been doing a lot of capacity building and training in the phase 1 and phase 2. Just to step even further from that, would there be any thought from the member country as how can we go further in terms of doing this risk pooling scheme or financial protection that could really help the region when it's come to, particularly when it's come to the disbursement of the payment if disaster happen.
Anyone has any thoughts how to move from training towards financial products, financial collaboration as well? If in fact anyone thinks that's needed. Can we have pre-chat?
I think one of the biggest questions that regulators or ministry have prior to rolling out solutions is whether is it going to work? Because to a certain extent, there's a fear of the unknown, and there are a lot of there's a lot of things at stake. So I don't know personally. Just a disclaimer, probably not the views of the Central Bank of Malaysia, but my own. One way we could potentially move forward is to pilot programs. Because if we want to roll it out in a very large scale, it's going to take many, many years. So piloting would help. And I think we've seen in some of our member countries, I think in Philippines, there are a lot of examples being rolled out, and there are a lot of refinements made to the different proposals that they've been working on. And once the pilots are being rolled out, sharing of the outcomes of the pilot, the successes, the challenges, and making those findings well known and transparent to other member countries may instill confidence. And once we see the results, then perhaps there's a little bit more appetite to move forward in making things happen. So one is to get over the fear of the unknown. And one way we could kind of wet our toes a little bit would be pilot programs. But I also acknowledge that takes a lot of buy-in from the different ministries and agencies. So I think going back to yesterday's point about finding a champion in certain areas may help as well.
Thank you. And I think definitely for regulators, fear of the unknown is part of the job description. Pichaya?
Yeah, I don't have any further comment because I think the pilot program is actually really a good idea, particularly when we consider the nature of ASEAN and the culture of ASEAN. We always talking about if the model of as 2+X or whatsoever model that we use in our negotiation in different forums, but the pilot project is something that definitely would be useful and maybe worth considering for everyone. But I actually thank all the participants for their comments and their sharings, the priorities and their thought about what would make it things work for them, identify what the support that they would need in the future. For me, we take that and then maybe just to further help the ASEAN member countries to further this implementation. That's we can discuss later on how we can move forward. Yeah, I think I stop here.
Connor, I think that's back to you for the wrap up. Thank you, everyone.
Perfect. Yeah, tangled up in the sheets underneath the table. So there's a lot of food for thought, and it's not just me trying to be funny about the fact that we're about to go for lunch. But I really found that when we actually got into the sort of culmination discussion, which is really about sort of, okay, so now what? It was very, I think, instructive, particularly for Min and myself, coming at it from the perspective of the Global Asia Insurance Partnership as a new organization, trying to map out sort of where our direction of travel is, and using a forum like this to gain a deeper understanding of what's going on within the region, where are the priorities, where are the roadblocks, where are the impediments, understanding where we might be able to add value. You know, it's clear that the Asian Development Bank Institute has been a long-standing partner for the region. There's a lot, I think, that the ADBI has done already. And I think that there's a lot that the ADBI will continue to do. And I think that the challenge for Pachaya and ourselves at GIP is to think through how our collaborative efforts could create something where the sum is greater than the component parts. And there are aspects that I think coming out of this conversation where, you know, maybe there's things that GIP could do separately, but as part of a sort of coordinated approach. And you know, I am serious about talking about the internship piece because, you know, giving a platform and a framework for supervisors to come and gain some international exposure to some of these issues, work within an organization where they can deepen their understanding and knowledge of not only the instruments, the technical side of things, but also in terms of how different jurisdictions are approaching these challenges, how different jurisdictions are addressing the need to build a sort of critical mass of political and decision-making support within their respective governments to be able to move forward on these things, how different jurisdictions are approaching really that implementation challenge. I think hearing this morning, particularly around some of the priority challenges, I suppose I differentiate between two things. And I mentioned this when we were closing off that morning session, is that there is a capabilities piece, a capabilities component, and there, we talk about the data, and I probed a little bit with the Philippines because I really think it's not enough to just say data. We have to be mindful as professionals about where are the priority areas that we should be focusing our energy. I think in a lot of situations, in a lot of contexts, what we've seen is that data becomes a reason to not do something. And we don't want that. We want to actually address the data challenge. And to address the data challenge, I think we have to be pragmatic and creative in terms of how we utilize the networks of support that are there, the data that is there, and how we can turn it into something usable. I'll share a short anecdote. So in my time working at the IAIS, we have been, or we were developing, they are continuing to develop, an insurance capital standard, very technical piece of work. And they're doing a giant field testing exercise. And they've brought together the 50 largest, give or take, insurance groups from around the world. These are sophisticated operators. These are very large institutions. And we do a massive data collection exercise because we've been field testing this insurance capital standard. And we get data from the companies. And I tell you, you cannot quote me, but it is crap. It is really, really bad. And these are sophisticated institutions. And I think that there's a number of different reasons for it. One, everybody looks at it slightly differently, right? And so when they're collecting data and they're classifying data and all these great things, you know, these subtle sort of perceptions and different viewpoints have cumulative effects that are far greater than those minor decisions. Secondly, there's no standardized approach to these things. You know, we think that there is, but there's not. And so we have to appreciate that just because we have careers now like data scientists and we have, you know, AI and machine learning, it doesn't mean that the data is actually there. You know, we really do need to work at it. And I think that the big thing that we can do as professionals is actually to take that step back and ask ourselves, what do we really need to make informed decisions? And how can we actually make sure that we have it? And I hope that the conversation that we had today, and particularly this morning, where we talked about data as part of this broader challenge around capabilities, there is an appreciation for the fact that we don't need everything, okay? Not having everything is not a reason to not do anything. We need to actually wrap our heads around what is essential and how can we make sure that we get it. And there is going to be, no doubt, many instances where we have to rely on proxy data. It's never the best thing in the world, but ultimately, you know, we need to be able to actually feed the machines that are going to enable us to make decisions and support our decision-making processes. So I think the data challenge is real, but I do think that collectively we can come together and identify ways that we can no longer look at data as an impediment, but rather use it as a topic of discussion that enables us to focus in on what do we really need and potentially maybe simplify our lives a little bit so that data doesn't become an impediment to actually seeing progress. The second thing on the capability side, and it ties into the data, is really on the analytics. And we've seen a lot of different things happening in terms of the application of advanced analytical approaches and AI and machine learning and all of these things. But ultimately, you know, when we talk about analytics, we're talking about being able to actually draw useful insights and support rigorous and robust systems and processes. And so, yes, there's probably more that we can do in terms of supporting analytics. There's probably more that we can do in terms of targeted analytics. And I think that ultimately we can get into a place where, you know, collectively, you know, sharing of experience and utilizing the range of different sort of networks and supports that are out there, we can probably see progress in that space as well. The implementation challenge, the second sort of component that was part of my takeaway this morning was implementation challenge. And we heard it from Benedict yesterday. It came up in a number of different settings. This is a big challenge. And there's no one right answer on the implementation challenge. There is, from my perspective, a multitude of different approaches that we have to think about when we think about implementation. And, you know, there's a saying, you can have it, you can pick two, fast, cheap, or good. You don't get all three. And implementation is an investment. If you want to actually move forward in the implementation space, you know, you need to have a defined plan. You need to understand the context in which you're trying to deliver this plan. You need to understand how you build the network network of support that's necessary to actually see the plan progress. And you need to be dogged in your determination to actually see it successful. Because if you give up at the first instance that you encounter a decision maker or policy maker who says no, or you give up because you can't get sufficient resources that you think that you need to be able to execute your plan, I'll tell you the truth, you're not going to be successful. You really need to be dogged in your determination. And I think that ultimately any implementation challenge to see success, you really, I can't emphasize it enough, need to be determined to see success. We heard yesterday a lot about the capabilities that exist within these different facilities and these different instruments. And I think that there's more to explore there in terms of how we can learn from different experiences in different regions. We have to recognize, of course, there are specific circumstances in which some of these facilities and instruments have developed, be it the Pacific Islanders or the Caribbean or Central Asian jurisdictions. But I think that there's also very important lessons and insights that we can take away from them. In David's presentation and as he went through it, it's clear that there's so much there. So let's think about ways that we can learn from it. And then you think about other sort of acronym. We joke that there's acronym soup out there. You have to figure out where all these things come from. But it is something that, I think that there's a lot of motivation. And I think that there's a lot of goodwill. And increasingly, and I have to admit, having worked in insurance in this international environment for a while, I'm actually quite surprised how much capacity is actually being allocated on the part of some of the G7 countries towards supporting initiatives that are really designed to enhance global resilience. And in particular, I think we have to recognize the German government has done a lot. And they continue to do a lot, and they're providing a lot of support. And there are opportunities to take advantage of some of these global initiatives and global compacts and global partnerships and et cetera, because there is capacity there. And I think, as David mentioned, he's good offices in terms of helping to facilitate connections with some of them. I'd be happy to do my part as well, but I think that we have to think about how we can leverage off this moment in time where there actually is a lot more support and capacity that's been allocated towards supporting insurance and supporting insurance as a means to support broader resilience in the face of, as Lubo mentioned, a very complex and frankly scary risk environment. I'll close just by saying that this has been a great opportunity for me. Having the opportunity to talk to people, to hear what's going on within the region, and to actually meet people face to face, it's so refreshing. I think all of us have had a little bit of video conference fatigue. Yeah, I'm done with video conferences. Yes, they're helpful and practical and everything else, but there's nothing like having an excuse to get up and put a suit on instead of just putting a shirt on. And I have to also say that, there's so much of the intangible benefit that comes from actually getting together. Because we do have an opportunity, those informal chats, getting a coffee or a tea or over lunch. There is so much in terms of extracting insights and knowledge, generating new thoughts through that sort of dialectical relationship between people. It's really something that's quite special. So, a big thank you to ADBI and to Pim. Thank you. Pachaya, thank you. OIC, thank you. Kapung Krap. It's been just an absolute pleasure to get together in a beautiful spot, in a beautiful location, a very nice hotel. And to actually be able to share and to learn and hopefully navigate through all of the different insights that we've heard today to come up with tangible ways in which we can support the region in strengthening resilience over time. So thank you very much. I'll stop talking, except for two things. One, lunch, which is faulty, which is out the door to the left. Not down the hallway, it's the restaurant on the left, right before the pool, right? Okay. Second thing is the survey. Please do fill out the survey. These things are very valuable, as I mentioned yesterday, very helpful for organizers, really to make sure that the constituency that we're trying to support really does feel that they're able to extract as much benefit and value from it. So please do fill out the survey. And I think with that, we're done. Chaya, any final?
Not so much, just to thank you, Connor, for taking over this role, because I know I make quite a trouble to everyone that I'm not there. And so just thank you everyone again. And as Connor just mentioned, the survey would be something that helping us to provide capacity building that match to your needs better. We have heard from the last session, so if you want to put it in writing for us, that's something that we can just take over and just come up with new capacity building that more efficient for everyone. I thank everyone again, or the speaker, the participant. A special thanks to Prishaya as tremendous help through all this process. And we're looking forward to welcoming you again in ADBI and hopefully one of the ADBI collaboration with JIP event in the future. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone, and see you at lunch.